Hello. How's it
Hello.
going? Is everything okay with the audio? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound fine. I think you might be using the wrong mic, though. I think you might be using a webcam mic or something.
I mean, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
very different in terms of its quality.
is
Than how
it
you,
is it any better now or that? I don't know what's going
no,
on.
you still sound pretty loud.
Um, okay. You know what? I'm gonna have to figure that out later. I'm sorry about, about
It's all good.
that.
I can turn it down on my side, so
Okay.
no
Okay.
problem for me.
Um, well, anyway, what we've got today is the next part of the moral philosophy series that we were doing last week. And here, let me actually. Did that fix it? No, probably not, huh?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, we're doing a lecture series like college level lectures on moral philosophy, and we got the next one of those right now. Well, for once, the volume level of that seems really good.
The following scenario is probably an
Improvement.
experience that you can relate to at least some degree. Let's imagine that Thanksgiving is coming up. You're thinking about the excellent turkey, the carefully prepared stuffing, and really all the delicious food that you're going to be eating. Perhaps you're thinking about the football game that'll be on and whether your team's going to win. And then you start to reflect on the fact that also many of your family and extended family will be there sitting around the dinner table with you. And you imagine all of them engaged in jovial conversation, catching up on all the events of the past year and seeing what everyone is up to with their lives. And this all sounds great. But then you realize that unfortunately, there's a dark underside to the situation. Because you also remember that many of these cherished family members that you'll be enjoying this meal with have very strong and divergent views about morality, ethics, politics, and religion. And you start to actually shake a little bit. Maybe your palms get a little sweaty. You're starting to think about and get very nervous about the fact that there could be disagreement at the Thanksgiving dinner table. In fact, every year we see articles in the news about people who are just in this situation, describing the sort of nervousness and anxiousness and anxiety they have about the holidays coming up and the disagreements of their family members who are coming together for the first time that year. Now, I think this is an interesting phenomena because we might say, well, why should this make us nervous? Granted, people disagree, granted, people see the world differently, but why should this necessarily be a situation or a scenario that we dread or get nervous or anxious about? And I think the answer lies in the fact that if you can relate to the situation, if you felt such anxiety, it's not just the disagreement that is making you nervous and anxious. It's the fact that that disagreement often devolves into heated or angry rhetoric. Right, and you may have been in this situation yourself where, let's say, you debate a political or ethical or religious matter with a friend, and maybe you start off making some reasonable and rational points in a calm way, but eventually it devolves in close to a shouting match. And this is a phenomena I want to explore in this
Never.
video, namely the phenomena of why ethical disagreement so often devolves into heated rhetoric. And what I want to explore are a couple things. First, why is it that when we're talking about what's right or wrong, what is just or unjust, or what should be done in a political or religious sphere, why is it that when we discuss these topics, we so often get angry with one another? And furthermore, once we delve further into the causes of that conflict, I want to consider and think about are there any ways in which that conflict might be avoided?
Can we pause for a second? Okay. First of all, is my audio any better now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. I had the gain on my mic turned way up for some reason, but I turned it back down. Okay, so do you have any initial response to that question? Like, why is it that you think people get angry so often in ethics discussions?
Um, I don't know. Like, what I want to initially say is because, like, humans are evolved lizards, and we're not really good at this kind of stuff. But I don't know if that's actually like a very like interesting or useful answer. I think like it's communication is hard and difficult, and so you should expect it to sometimes lead to misunderstanding. It's really easy, even in a conversation where two people are trying their best, it's really easy for miscommunication to happen, and it can be very frustrating to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. All of that stuff is true. I think on top of that, I would say it seems like there is a social norm where being really angry and hostile toward another person is tolerated more in if you're moralizing against them.
Oh yeah, that righteous indignation is a real thing that people sometimes go way too far on.
Yeah, that's all I got for now.
Yeah.
As explained by the author of our textbook, this phenomenon of angry and heated disagreement really just seems to be a core characteristic of ethical disputes themselves. She explains this point in the following way. One thing we know for sure about ethics is that it concerns matters in conflict, dilemmas, matters that people get upset about and argue about. So the question is, what might those be? What is the reason? What is the fundamental underlying reason that when we're engaged in an ethical dispute or a political dispute, we think there's a high probability, or at least a decent chance, that there could be heated rhetoric and angry disagreement? And this concern is not just something that's a contemporary concern in our society, it's a very old and ancient concern. And to prove this to you, I want to show you a discussion along these lines that was found in a very old piece of philosophical writing, namely one of the dialogues of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And the dialogue in particular that I want to look at is a dialogue entitled The Euthyphro. Now, all of Plato's dialogues take place as a conversation between different characters, and in the vast majority of cases, Socrates is the main character. Now, in this particular dialogue, the Euthyphro, we see Socrates and this other person, Euthyphro, engaged in a discussion about the nature of morality. Namely, their main concern is how do we know what the right thing to do is? How do we know that we're acting in an ethically correct manner? And the suggestion that Euthyphro makes is that we can know what the right thing to do is, and he, in fact, knows that what he is doing is correct because the gods love what is doing because the gods would agree with his actions. And the basic idea is that if the gods would love our actions, then they're good ones, and if the gods hate some action, then it is a bad one. Now, the observation that Socrates makes about this point really arises from some facts about Greek mythology. In the more popular monotheistic religions of today, God is one thing, God is a unity, and God does not disagree with himself. But in ancient Greek mythology, the gods were in some sense much more like human beings. They had their own interests and desires, and they often did engage in angry conflict. And both in the course of the discussion, both Euthyphro and Socrates notice this. So Euthyphro gives the following example. Zeus is the best and most just of the gods, yet they agree that he bound his father because he unjustly swallowed his sons, and that he in turn castrated his father for similar reasons. That certainly is a very clear instance of conflict between the gods. And Socrates later reiterates this point. He says, we have also stated that the gods are in a state of discord, that they are odds with each other, Euthyphro, and that they are at enmity with each other. Has that too been said? It has. So they both point out that the gods disagree vigorously with one another, even to the point of violent conflict. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters for two reasons. First, it shows that Euthyphro's attempt to say that whatever the gods love is the right thing has a bit of a flaw, because if they all disagree about what is good and bad, if they love and hate different things, we don't really have clear moral guidance. But for our purposes, the importance of this point is somewhat different. One of the things that we see Socrates concerned about here is not just the fact that the gods do disagree, but he wants to know, why do they disagree?
Can we pause
What
for a
is it
second
that
here?
causes them to engage in these?
I don't. This is something I probably just never thought about before, but actually this makes polytheism seem really based to me. Like the fact that the gods can disagree about things kind of means that you have different religiously endorsed points of view on the same issue, and it can get you to like consider different sides of a question in a way that monotheism won't.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think a lot of the I don't really have a super good Christian education, but I have some, and I've got some friends that are, or a friend in particular that is like very knowledgeable about the Bible. And man, talking to him, I feel like all of the best Christian sayings and stuff are sort of like stuff that isn't from the Bible. Like I don't know if you're familiar with like the Serenity Prayer, for
Oh
example. Like I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
yeah, that one's great. But yeah, stuff like that I feel like is always lacking from the Bible itself. Or like love the sinner, hate the sin. Like that's also not from the Bible. It's always funny to me that there's so much sort of extra biblical like sort of truisms and sayings.
Mm-hmm. I suppose like there's it. Maybe Christianity can have like a kind of a rough equivalent to this, just because there's so many different characters in the Bible, and they have different saints um and depending on your point of view on the Trinity. I mean, I get. Well, actually, that's not really going to give you different points of view, but there's at least like enough different material in the Bible that you could find different answers to the same thing. But it seems like the way that people use that is to just go looking for justification for the answer that they want. Um, I mean, maybe the same thing would just end up happening in polytheism, right? It's just go find the God that agrees with the opinion that I want them to have. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's something I have heard a bunch, but I don't know if it's true because it kind of sounds bullshit. Is the idea that that in the classical period there was a much less emphasis placed on the idea of like religious doctrine as truth and more as like cultural parables and stories from which you can extract lessons or knowledge. But there's very much a lessened idea of a literal God and a literal afterlife. But I don't know if that's actually true. That's something I've heard a lot though.
It could make sense if that were true, just because I know a lot of the Greek stories were treated that way. Like if you think like Aesop's fables, for example, would have been just from like a few hundred years before that, and so it it might be a cultural context where that thing seems more likely. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something I want to look into one day.
Angry conflicts. And I think by looking at Socrates' comments on this point, maybe we can come to understand why we have our own angry conflicts. We can come to better understand what is it that causes us to use angry and heated rhetoric in ethical, moral, and political disputes. Now, in order to answer the question of what causes angry disagreement, whether among the gods of the ancient Greek mythology or among people today, what we can do, and in fact what Socrates did in the dialogue De Euthyphro, is distinguish between three different kinds of statements or three different subjects. Again, Socrates asked the question, what are the subjects of difference, the things people disagree about that cause hatred and anger? And here we're going to look at three different types of statements: logical statements, factual statements, and normative statements. So let's start with logical statements, and we'll start with the Euthyphro and then look at Newton's explanation of these points. So the first suggestion, the first kind of statement Socrates identifies, he explains in the following way. He says, let us look at it in this way. If you and I were to differ about numbers as to which is greater, would this difference make us enemies and angry with each other? Or would we proceed to count and soon resolve our difference about this? Euthyphro says we would certainly do so. Right? So let's say we're having a very odd disagreement about whether 2 or 4 was the larger number. Now, it's unlikely we would have such a disagreement, but maybe with a larger or more complex number, perhaps we could have a disagreement we could have a disagreement of that sort. Now, the question he's asking is, how would we go about resolving this disagreement? Well, he says, look, if we want to resolve the disagreement, we just have to count. You count to 2, I count to 4. We see who has to count more to get to their number. And of course, whoever has to count more to get to their number has the larger number. There's a clear and sort of precise way of determining the answer to this question. And so, for that reason, Socrates says, look, it's very unlikely that this is the sort of thing people would fight angrily about. Right, at your Thanksgiving dinner table, people might fight angrily about whether you should vote Republican or Democrat, but they're very unlikely to fight over whether 2 or 4 is a larger number, or whether a triangle or a square has more sides. These just are not the sorts of things that cause angry disagreement. And the reason for this is because these subjects deal in what we're going to call logical statements. And Newton explains the nature of these statements in the following way. She says logical or formal statements are definitions or statements derivable from definitions, including the entirety of mathematical discourse. So, for instance, 2 plus 2 equals 4, a square has 4 equal sides. Now, what does she mean when she says these are derivable from definitions?
I've seen people have angry conversations about math.
If you know what the concept of 2 is, and you know what the concept of 4 is, and you know what the plus sign and the equal sign mean. If you know the definition,
have you ever been part of the 0.999 repeating equals 1?
Know that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is true.
Oh yeah, my friend group was never the same.
Provided you understand what a square is, you also know it must necessarily have 4 equal sides. And if you're unsure about that statement, the reason isn't because you haven't had enough experience in the world, it's just because you don't know the definition of a square properly. And this characteristic of all we need to know is the definition of the terms to know the statement is true is a characteristic of logical statements. And that means that, as Newton explains, false statements in this category must be self-contradictory. She gives the example, if you say 2 plus 2 equals 5, or you start talking about round squares, you contradict yourself. You assert what cannot possibly be true. Because if you're talking about a round square, you're not talking about a square anymore. If you say 2 plus 2 equals 5, you're just fundamentally confused about numbers. And so a logical truth or a logically valid statement is something that can never be false. And importantly, what this means is that for us to know, for instance, that a square has 4 sides, we don't need to go out and find every square in the world.
This is only true if people agree on the definitions and don't argue about those.
Well, does this have 4 sides or 3 or 5? No, because if we come across anything with 3 or 5 sides, we know it's not a square. So logical truths do not depend on any facts about the world. They're true in virtue of their internal structure or true in virtue of the definition of the terms used. And there are many examples of these. Here are some more examples. Again, 2 plus 2 equals 4, 5 is greater than 2, triangles have 3 sides, each side of a square is of equal length, all bachelors are unmarried males, all human beings are mammals. Right? You can no more deny that triangles have 3 sides than you can deny that all human beings are mammals. If you say you found a human being that isn't a mammal, well, then you're just confused about what a human being is, because a human being is a biological category in which every member of that category is a mammal. So all logical statements are necessarily true, and necessarily true by the definition of their terms. Furthermore, it is because logical statements are true just in virtue of the definition of their terms that there's no need to fight about them. All we need to do is get clear on what the terms or definitions in the statement mean, and we can all agree that the statement is either true or false. Now let's turn to a second kind of statement. Let's think about what we will call factual statements. And again, let's turn to the text of Euthyphro. So Socrates now makes the following point. He says, again, if we differed about the larger and the smaller, we would turn to measurement and soon cease to differ. And about the heavier and the lighter, we would resort to weighing and be reconciled. So let's make a few points here. Sometimes it really is difficult to determine whether one object is larger than another. It may depend on the angle you're looking at the object from, the distance you are from it, and insofar as we all occupy different situations or places in the world, we might look at two objects and at first very much be not on the same page about which is larger or smaller or which is heavier or lighter. But of course, what Socrates points out is that this is not likely in the long term to devolve into angry conflict. Because if that really is the issue, then we have an objective way of determining this question. If we want to know which of the two objects is longer, we can get a ruler, which provides an objective standard that transcends our particular points of view. If we want to know which object is heavier, then we can just get a scale and use that objective measure as opposed to our
This person
subjective
is on the
points of
payroll
view
of
or
Big
subjective
Ruler.
views on this matter.
Bro.
So once again, just like logical statements, with factual statements, the point Socrates wants to make is that while there might be more opportunity for conflict here, insofar as we have objective means of measurement and answering the question, it's not likely that we're going to just sort of bottom out in an angry disagreement. And this is because of some fundamental facts about what we're calling factual or empirical statements. As Newton claims, these statements are assertions about the world out there, the physical environment of our existence, including the entirety of scientific discourse, from theoretical physics to sociology. And so, what this means is a factual statement is making a claim of fact about the world, about the physical world, whether that world is very small particles of theoretical physics, or about the principles of psychology of the human mind, or economic principles that govern transactions in society. All of these would be examples of factual statements. And they're ideally they can be verified. We can test and to see whether they're true or false by controlled observation. And this is what scientists do. You come up with experiments, you run the experiments, you examine the results, and you see if the initial hypothesis is true or false. Now, not all factual statements require that sort of sophisticated observation. Some factual statements are much more simple, as, what's the weather outside or how tall is a certain person. And we can verify these just by using our senses, using our sight, our smell, our taste of touch, and feel and hearing. All these will give us all sorts of information about facts about the world. Now, one thing you'll notice that makes these statements different from logical statements is that all of these statements, the way we know whether they're true or not, depends on experience. Right? So, for instance, let's take the example that Newton uses. It's raining outside. How do we know if it's raining outside? Well, we look and we see if it's raining outside. And she says on the day she wrote this, it is actually true that it's raining. But of course, it's likely that maybe tomorrow it won't be raining. So, whereas it's always necessarily true that a triangle has three sides, the statement that it is raining outside is sometimes true and sometimes false. It depends on the day, and it always has to be verified by our observation. So, here are some other statements that would fall into this category. Ryan is tall, it's raining outside, a family of four.
Ryan
lives
is
at
tall seems like
292
a
West
bad
Granville Street.
example. It's like
Next
very
week, the temperature
ambiguous.
will reach 90 degrees.
Yeah,
Recent changes to tax
it really
policy
isn't.
will result in GDP growth over the next year. These first two categories show that some factual statements are relatively straightforward and just the average person can determine their truth using their five senses, and others will require a much more detailed and rigorous scientific method. Finally, there's others that will have, as we'll see, a more prevalent role in our moral reasoning. For instance, consider the factual statements lying to my siblings will hurt their feelings, or Americans have roughly split opinions on the ethics of the death penalty. Both of these are about moral matters, lying or the death penalty, but also notice that both of them are factual statements. They're claims of fact about the world that we can verify or we can undermine or deny on the basis of observation. Now, again, the main point here for our purposes is the following. While there can be some conflict about factual statements, the hope is that in the long run, we can arrive at consensus. And we can arrive at consensus on these
That's
factual
quite
claims
optimistic.
by using either just our sort of innate
We
abilities of
can, but
sense
will we?
perception, our use of our sight or our touch or our hearing, etc., or through the scientific method. The idea is that it really doesn't make sense to get into angry disagreement about factual claims
Yeah, tell
because
that
we
to flat
have some
earthers.
objective method of determining whether they're true or false.
It just seems like a lot of
So we have
conspiracy
seen
theories would
that
fall into that
logical
last
and factual
category.
statements are
Yep.
different in various respects. But there's one important respect in which Socrates thinks these statements are similar. And that is the respect in which he believes neither of these is very likely to cause sustained angry disagreement. We're not going to spend a lot of time arguing about whether triangles have three sides. We're not going to spend a lot of time getting into an angry argument about whether someone is above 6 feet tall. There are clear methods of determining the truth on these questions. But that is not the case in Socrates' view for this last category of statements, which we're going to call normative statements. So let's again return to the text of the Euthyphro. Socrates says, what subjective difference would make us angry and hostile to each other if we were unable to come to a decision? Perhaps you do not have an answer ready, but examine as I tell you whether these subjects are the just and the unjust, the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the bad. Are these not the subjects of difference about which, when we are unable to come to a satisfactory decision, you and I and other men become hostile to each other whenever we do? And I think, and as an initial statement here, I think Socrates is certainly onto something. Let's think of some statements that would fall into these categories of the beautiful, and the good. Think about the statement, the death penalty is just, or the death penalty is unjust. Certainly, we can imagine people fighting angrily about that. It happens all the time. What about aesthetic statements about beauty? What if you said the Mona Lisa is the most beautiful painting that there is? Many people with a very high degree of investment in art and art
Can we
criticism
pause for a
would
second?
certainly, maybe some would agree, some would disagree, and
I feel like what he's saying now is half right, but I think a lot of the things that people end up disagreeing about, it's not that they're disagreeing always on the principles of what's right and wrong, but they're instead disagreeing on facts that are closely connected to those principles. So,
Yeah.
like, for example, like people will disagree about whether a fetus is a person or something like that, right? But it's because, like, person is something that they've morally loaded, or it's something
Yeah.
that's relevant to their values, or you know, if we agree that corruption is bad, then somebody will accuse a particular politician of being corrupt, and then you know, these at face value seem like factual statements, but really, like, they get emotionally charged just because they're adjacent to our values.
Yeah, I mean, like, these are the issues where, Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand, when we disagree about, the nature of certain things can become so untenable that it kind of demands a resolution. And you can get to really scary places if you disagree on factual things. I mean, like, the classic example would be like cults, right? I mean, like, hey, if those people at Waco really were talking to God, then, that's really starts to change some things. But, obviously they weren't. Or like January 6th would be a more modern example, right? Like, if it really was the case that there was some insane conspiracy to take over the country, then, you probably would in some degree be justified, to a revolution, right? If there's some tyrannical government that's taking over, but there isn't. So it's really dangerous when you have, these huge disconnects from reality, because you can get to some really crazy places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. The end points are so divergent that they might as well be a fundamental moral disagreement in a certain respect.
Yeah, I agree. And we traditionally tend to think of religion and politics as the topics that people get into the most heated discussions about, right? But if we think about a question like, is there a God? Like at face value, again, factual statement, but it's so closely connected to a lot of people's values that I think this is why we get upset about it. And yeah, I think a lot of conspiracy theories are like this too. Like the flat Earth thing. It's like it should just be a question of fact, but I think people get real upset about the flat Earth thing because like. Not that they care about the fact for no reason, but it's all about like whether you can trust authorities and all this other stuff comes into it.
Yeah, issues become proxies for other things as well in terms of like a social identity. Um,
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's like every couple of weeks there's some pointless thing that like everyone like loses their mind over. Like I don't know if you saw any of like the gas stove stuff, but it's like this isn't like seriously like happening anywhere. But like it just becomes like an issue to sort of like signal that like you're on the right side.
I actually didn't hear about the gas stove thing. What is that?
There was some study or something that there was either a study that came out or there's some health official that said something like gas stoves are worse for you than induction stoves because you breathe in fumes. And it's like, okay, that's pretty fucking obvious. And then there were a million sort of right leaning memes at sort of suggesting that and making fun of the fact that they would like want to ban gas stoves. And in fact, I think Ron DeSantis recently just passed it so that in Florida, you passed a law that's made it illegal to have any sales tax on gas stoves. It was like this whole meme, oh, they're gonna ban gas stoves. And it's like, okay, I don't think this is seriously being discussed anywhere. But it just became a place to sort of like, preach to the choir, and that's a real problem, no matter where you go in the political spectrum.
Okay, I know there's this kind of running joke among a lot of like right of center people that they'll look at the left and they'll think like they just think anything that does harm is evil, right? It's like harm is just a proxy for everything that must be banned and destroyed in the world, and I don't know, and it doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, you and I have had conversations with the kind of people who will tell you like XYZ thing is evil because it does harm, and like it's like it has this one bad effect, therefore it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, is that kind of the you think what's going on with the gas stove thing is that they're like using that to like to launch this familiar joke about like, oh, the left is authoritarian about harm? Is that what it is?
I think sort of. It's just I think there's this real like it's just sort of this generic belief that that big government is coming for you. They want to control your lives. They want to take away these things. The government regulations are silly. Liberals are weak and pathetic, and that sort of all gets rolled into one where it's like these weak, pathetic liberals want to ban the manly gas stoves, but we're not going to let those NPCs take it away from us. Stuff like this.
I remember when I was a little kid, I live in California. I've lived in most of my life in California. And when I was a little kid here, the whole state was much more permissive about cigarette smoking than it is today. And like back then, you could just like smoke cigarettes inside a restaurant they would have like, even on airplanes, they would have like a smoking section of the airplane. It's at some point, maybe like 20-ish years ago, they did away with all that, and like you pretty much don't have indoor smoking spaces almost at all anymore. And so it's like, yeah, it's kind of true that we do use government to try to ban things that are harmful to us, but it's just I don't think anybody actually disagrees that we should sometimes use government to ban things that are harmful to us. I think we just have different thresholds for it.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just a cultural. It's mostly just a culture war thing. It's something to, shit on the other side and talk with your side about how awesome you guys are. I mean, everyone does it.
Yeah.
They may very well engage in heated disagreement about that question. What about good and bad? What if you said lying is always bad, lying is always wrong? That's certainly a topic that can generate a lot of heated debate and discussion and rhetoric. And even if we take it out of the moral realm, what if you were to say something like LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time? There have been many angry disputes about that as well. So Socrates notes that when we are fighting angrily, and when there's a subject about which we can't come to an agreement, it is because that subject falls into one of these categories. It's about justice, it's about goodness, it's about beauty. And the author of our textbook, Newton, describes these kinds of statements as normative statements. They're assertions about what is right, what is good, or what should be done. One way to think about these kinds of statements is they apply a standard. When you say the death penalty is unjust, you're saying there's some standard of justice, the death penalty doesn't meet it. When you say the Mona Lisa is the most beautiful painting there is, they're saying there's some standard of excellence or transcendent beauty, and the Mona Lisa does meet that standard. So normative statements tell us what we should do, they say what is good, they apply some standard of evaluation. Now, the reason this matters in the present context, and one way in which it seems like our evaluation of these statements differs from logical and factual statements, is that we don't seem to have as clear a method of determining the truth of these kinds of statements. We said with logical statements, just pay attention to the definitions of the terms. With factual statements, just engage in either everyday observation or the scientific method. But take a statement like the death penalty is unjust. What method do we have for discovering whether that is true or false? Now, there may very well be methods, and I think there are methods we can use to answer that question. But there certainly isn't the sort of clear and straightforward, and maybe more importantly, widely accepted method we can use to determine the truth of that claim. And this is why Newton notes that when we engage in disputes about the death penalty or abortion or the ethics of lying or anything that falls in this normative category, then we become hostile, we lose our temper, and it seems like the certainties of math and science are forever beyond the grasp of our normative systems. Now, again, we can see a wide variety of normative statements. We use them all the time, which perhaps should make it even more troubling that they seem to inevitably lead to angry disagreement. So, for instance, it's always wrong to tell a lie, the death penalty is morally acceptable, there's nothing wrong with the recreational use of marijuana, nonviolent drug users should be given harsh prison sentences, abortion is a morally acceptable action, you should vote for Ryan for President of the United States. All these statements tell us what we should do, what is good, or what we should not do, or what is bad. That's what makes them normative. Now, I think it's very important to think about
Paid for by the Tim Ryan for
is it that
President
Socrates
campaign.
accepts here that there's no clear method for determining the truth to these questions as there is in the case of logical or factual truths. And there might be two broad possibilities. One possibility is that Socrates just thinks that there is no truth to these questions. When you make a claim like the death penalty is unjust, that statement is neither true nor is it false. It's just entirely subjective, it's entirely relative. There just is no truth we're talking about here. Now, I think there's a couple reasons why we should want to reject that, and I think Socrates rejected it as well. From other works by Socrates, you see that he's engaged in a lifelong quest for knowledge of virtue and how to live a good life. And it would seem very strange that he would devote himself to ethics and morality and trying to discover how to live, and at the same time think that there was actually no answer to that question.
I don't
So it
really
seems
think
very
that does
unlikely
seem
Socrates
weird.
took that view. In addition, I don't really think that we want or actually do take that view either. There's no doubt, as we've said, that ethical disagreement happens all the time. And it's very tempting to just want to say, well, then ethics or morality must be subjective. But I'm pretty sure we can pin down certain statements or certain claims that we would think anyone should agree with. For instance, consider the following normative statement: it is always morally wrong to torture an innocent person for no other reason than the enjoyment of the torturer. I think we would all agree with that statement, and I think we would all say that not only is it true, but we know this to be objectively true, not just a matter of opinion. So when we think about why there's not a
Can we
clear
pause here?
method for resolving ethical disagreement,
I'm not. It seemed like he just didn't give any justification for thinking that that's objectively true. Like, even if every human agrees on something, that I don't think that makes it objectively true. I just think that means humans have so much in common with one another that they have common opinions.
Yeah, was he trying to say that because we all agree on it, it's objectively true, or just the way I interpreted that, maybe I'm getting it wrong, was that he was saying, well, if we agree on this, then we can work from it as a baseline and sort of try and figure out why we believe that or what implications there are that we can agree on.
Yeah, well, that second interpretation is one that I would be totally on board with. Like if all humans agree that this is a bad thing, then that's fine. Like, we can use it as a common basis for something. But like, I don't know. I guess I'm taking issue with the claim that it is objectively true, or that the agreement of humans on it is evidence for that. And also the earlier thing he said, where he said, like, if Socrates doesn't believe in moral facts, then it would seem strange for him to spend his life in pursuit of virtue. But I just don't think that that's true at all. I think like. I mean, I do not believe in moral facts, and nevertheless, I spend my life trying to live up to my own values.
Yeah, I think there's a deeper. I don't want to say, oh, he needs to go deeper because he's already taken a bunch of time to establish like what is a factual claim versus a
Yeah.
logical claim. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like baggage in like what moral like axioms are, whether or not they're like something we agree upon or like an observable fact that we can debate upon. Like there's whole schools of philosophy sort of arguing those points.
Yeah.
I don't really think it's because there is no truth. I think the other option we should consider, and maybe is more plausible, is just that finding the truth is exceedingly difficult. It takes a long process of philosophical deliberation about the most fundamental morals and values in our society and in our lives. And I think we can see this in Socrates' own quest for philosophical knowledge about virtue and goodness. While he said he was on this lifelong quest for that knowledge, he also said the only thing he truly knew is that he doesn't have that knowledge. The only thing he truly knew is that he had no knowledge of real value. And to me, what I think that shows is that for Socrates, he recognized that normative truths, ethical truths exist, and he thought it was very valuable to find them, but ultimately he thought it was going to be very difficult to determine what they are. But insofar as we all care about these things, we all care about the death penalty or abortion or who to vote for. Insofar as we all care about those things, but there is no clear method for deciding the answer to those questions, it seems we're going to inevitably be led into conflict. And not just conflict, but angry conflict.
I'll grant them that it's true that if the answers to these things exist but are not obvious, it would have much the same result as if they don't exist.
I think Socrates is right that most of the statements we fight about are normative statements. We fight about what is right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. But I think it's also worth pointing out that there are some pretty clear examples of factual statements, statements that should be investigated and determined their truth through scientific inquiry, that also do lead to heated disagreements. And I'll just point to two examples of these here. So, one example would be climate change is caused by human activities. Another example that we can think of are masks are an effective means of stopping the spread of COVID 19. Now, notice both of these are factual claims. Neither is normative. Neither is telling us what's good or bad. Neither is telling us what we should do or ought to do, or what the government should do, or what you as an individual should do.
Although they're
Both are just
heavily
making a
implying those
claim about
things.
the world. The first one is saying that the various effects of climate change are the results of things human beings are doing. That's a factual claim. It's also a factual claim that masks are effective at stopping the spread of COVID 19. So neither is a normative statement. Yet, despite this, I think we can all agree that we have encountered and witnessed from both small scale and on a large society wide scale really angry and heated rhetoric and disagreement about these sorts of claims. People will argue about whether climate change is actually caused by human beings. People will argue about the effectiveness of masks. And the purpose of this video isn't to delve into the science or any of the facts surrounding those cases. I merely want to make the following point. There are factual claims that do produce heated disagreement. So the thing we should ask is, does this undermine Socrates' claim? Was Socrates wrong when he said that what we really fight about is goodness and badness, justice and injustice, normative statements? Well, not necessarily. In fact, I think there's a way of looking at these conflicts over these kinds of statements that actually confirms what Socrates has said all along. Ask yourself the following question. Why is it that people fight over whether climate change is the result of human activity? Why is it that people engage in angry disagreement about masks? Right? It's probably not because they're super invested in what is merely true or factual about the world. It's because these facts seem to have implications for how we live our lives. If climate change is the result of human activities, then perhaps government policies will be needed to limit certain human activities to mitigate the effects of climate change. If masks are an effective means of stopping the spread of COVID-19, if they're needed for public health, then that might recommend certain governmental policies. I think in these kinds of cases, when it looks like what we're fighting over are scientific matters, when it looks like what we're fighting over are factual claims, oftentimes what is really motivating the disagreement and what is making the disagreement so angry and heated is because it does seem to have a political, moral, or ethical source. It seems to have a political, moral, or ethical motivation. That's what's really doing the work here. That's what's explaining.
This seems
the
like
angry
exactly in
disagreement.
line with what we were saying
So I
earlier.
think we can say that even in cases where it looks like we're arguing about a factual claim, sometimes the real disagreement is about a normative claim. I think there's another kind of disagreement, however, that may cause more of a problem for Socrates' claim. And that is
Oh
if
no.
we do sometimes seem to fight and even fight angrily about factual claims that really don't seem to matter very much. We seem to really get invested in certain trivial disagreements. And here, what I have in mind are two examples of internet phenomena. The first one from 2015. This was the dress, right? You might recall this
Can we
picture was
pause
going
for a
around.
second?
Some people saw it as white and gold. Some people saw it as black.
What? Okay, what was your reaction to the dress back when this happened?
To be honest, I really missed most of it, but wasn't it just the case that like it was like a priming thing?
I don't actually know if it was a priming thing or if it was something due to weird lighting. I remember there was like some objectively correct answer to the question, and I think it was that the dress is blue and black or something like that. Is it? Um, but
Yeah,
like,
I know the audio ones are always the ones that are more freaky to me because you could just listen to the exact same clip like multiple times and hear it change.
oh yeah, I've had that experience with song lyrics where like you think they're saying one thing and then you could just that's the only thing you can hear them say
Oh yeah,
until
yeah.
and then you find out later that the lyric is something else and then now you can't ever go back and hear it the way that you did before. Yeah. The dress, I think if I recall correctly, I think it just is actually blue and black. But when I see that picture, I can't see it as blue and black. It just looks white and gold to me.
Really, even this picture right here looks white and gold to you?
Yeah. Like I'm just helpless
This looks
against
totally
this.
blue and black to me.
Like even knowing that the dress actually is blue and black, like I'm unable to see it that way. My eyes are just
So wild.
insist on seeing it as white and gold.
Hold on, give me one quick second. I gotta step away.
Okay. Yeah, this thing with the dress, I had a whole bunch of fights with friends back when that came out. It's one of the most convincing illusions I've ever seen in my life, and you know, even after finding out that the way I perceived it was just objectively not the way the dress is, I still can't help it. It's like if I see other pictures of the same dress, which I have seen since then. I can look at those other pictures and go like, oh yeah, like I was wrong. This dress actually is blue and black. But yeah, going back to this original one, no way. It's just for whatever reason the lighting or whatever or context, something about the context. Um, I just can't help but see it as white and gold. This is like a funny idea here, though, right? Where if Socrates is going to claim that that we only get into heated disagreements about factual statements, but because of our because they're things that are directly related to our values that we hold really close. Then something like the dress, I don't know. I mean, I think we could interpret it in a way where it does become adjacent to our values. I think people are very emotionally attached to the idea that they can trust their own eyes, that the world is what it appears to be at face value, and that we're not just in some kind of illusion or simulation or something like that, right? But that's as close as I can think of to core values that people might have, that are going to relate to an optical illusion.
Have you ever seen the let me see if I can actually find it here, the illusion of the train, where you can reverse the direction by thinking?
No, I don't. I don't know.
Oh, let me find this. This is,
Maybe I've seen it, but I don't.
What the fuck?
I don't know it from your description.
Let's see if I can find it.
Is that the one that you're talking about?
This isn't the one, but this one works, at least for me. If I zoom in here.
I mean, to me, it just looks like it's going to the right. Oh, but yeah. I could see it going the other way if I think.
Yeah, this isn't the smoothest one. Maybe there's a better one here.
But like this one, it's like pretty easy to understand how that could work because because it's being filmed with frames that are distinct from each other, and yeah.
Let's see if I can find this one. Oh yeah, this
I
one.
love this one.
This one is so wild. No matter how many times I do it. Yeah, let's see it. Oh, what the hell?
That's another one that it's just like, so for anybody who's not familiar with this, like square A and square B are actually exactly the same color, but this is another one that I look at it and I cannot see them as the same color. But if you like block out the screen so that you can only see A and B, you can tell they really are. But just because of, but when I see them with the context and the shading and everything, it's
Yeah, hold on. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, I think there's a web video photo editor right here I can use to load it up.
Oh, nice.
What the fuck is this, dude? God damn it! Fucking internet never goddamn works. Let me just edit, bro. Here we go. Yes, this is what I want. Oh my lord, please. Oh, is it even gonna load an SVG? It's gonna. Oh my gosh, please. It's not gonna work with an SVG, is it? Oh my god, damn it! Hold on, someone's copied this, and it's an actual photo now. Here we go. How do I? Oh, back. Load URL. Here we go. What? Yes.
Oh,
there we
it
go.
worked.
Success. Okay, and then how? Where's the tool here? Cutout. Is that gonna work? No. Whoa, go back. How do I?
I wonder if there's like a control click or shift click or something that you can do to cut out two parts.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Arrange and style. Yes. No. Here we go. Yes. Oh, okay. Wait. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna put it in Paint. Okay, and then I need to change stream Share your screen. Change window. Here we go. Paint. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. So
Okay, yeah.
you go in. This is always so crazy.
Yeah, look at that. Exactly the same color.
It's so wild. What's really funny is now B and B look totally different.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's no way these are the same color. There's no way. Oh shit.
Yep.
That's so wild. All the context clues of the edges and stuff that your brain is using to just totally fool you. This is always one of the wildest ones to me.
So
Anyways,
if people do get into heated disagreements about things like this, do you think that that's just because some people love to argue and fight, or do you think it actually is because it's somehow related to their values about whether the world is as it appears at face value, or what do you think?
I just think people aren't equipped, generally speaking, to like disbelieve their senses. I mean, like even like me, when I have knowledge of these things, but like I still totally like. I mean, when I walk around, I think that the sidewalk I'm walking on is there, so it can be very disconcerting, right? Like we only, I'm only like, oh well. I know that my senses are lying to me. It's like, they tell you in this is gonna fool you. But if no one told me this, I would not bother to investigate. It's not like you see a photo, you go, oh, are these actually different colors, or is this just my brain filling in context clues? And so much of our vision is like that. It's just
Yeah.
like filling in the blanks and stuff. It's like, have you ever done one of those staring at like a GIF that has swirls, and then it puts up
Yeah.
the Starry Night and the Starry Night swirls? Yeah, stuff like that. It's
Well,
it truly gives you an appreciation for the fact that what you see is just like a construction of sensory data, of like an approximation of whatever reality truly is, which also sort of begs the question of like, well, what is reality truly? Like, how would you even choose to present it? Like, there's no objectively correct way to do it.
yeah, if you ever learn about your blind spots, that's another thing that'll mess with your head. Is that that our eyes actually each have a certain spot in our vision that our eyes can't actually see, but your brain fills in the gap as if you could see it. You know what I'm talking about? It's like
Yep.
like if you kind of hold your hands like about here, something like that. That's like about where your blind spots are, and it's basically because your retina has a hole in it that all the nerves and blood vessels pass through, and so yeah, like if something appears in the blind spot, you actually won't be able to see it because your brain can't fill that in. It just has no idea that that's there. But if something's like moving around, then your brain will like put the thing in your field of vision, even though it can't actually see it.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah.
Another really fun one in sort of that category. Are you familiar with shibboleth?
Yeah, so this is like there's a story in the Bible where there's a tribe that's trying to root out spies from another tribe, and so they get them to say the word shibboleth because people from that other tribe have like a different accent that they speak with, and they can't say the word properly. And so the idea as it's passed down to us is that a shibboleth is something that people say as like a cultural signifier of like it's something that people say not for its literal meaning, but for like what it says about their like group identity.
But more specifically is the idea that there are some words that people can't even hear the differences in. Like there are people in the real world. Yeah, like there are people in America where if you say pen, as in like PEN, what you write with, and pin, PIN, like what you put in a shirt, they can't hear the difference. They'll hear those and they won't be able to distinguish them.
Yeah, I've had this experience learning a foreign language before. I used to study Korean a little bit, and they have like a couple of different sounds that apparently native speakers of Korean can easily distinguish from one another, and I just can't. They just sound exactly the same to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other one that I'm just thinking of now is also the have you ever looked into any of these sort of double brain experiments where when someone's corpus callosum, I think it is, the link between the two hemispheres of the brain is cut,
Oh
and they
yeah.
start testing. Yeah, and it kind of suggests that there's like a second consciousness and like the part of the brain that can't verbalize, where they'll show something to the part of the brain that can't verbalize, like a question, and that part of the brain which controls one of the arms will grab something, and then you'll ask him, "Hey, why'd you grab that?" And the talking part of the brain just makes up a reason that is like totally like random.
Yeah, there's a famous case. I don't know if this is true, but there's at least a famous story about yeah, like this by the way is a surgical treatment for epilepsy. Like if people have really bad life threatening epilepsy, they'll literally just cut their brain in half, and it succeeds at stopping the seizures from becoming life threatening. But anyway, there's a famous story about someone who had this done to them, and they had like the two different halves of their brain had like religious disagreements. It was like one side believed in a god and the other side was an atheist or something. It was it's pretty wild. I don't know 100% for sure that was true, but supposedly that that's how the story goes.
Yeah. Well, a very famous case would be that actually did happen in psychology. I don't know if you're aware of Phineas Gage.
Oh, is that the person who had the like metal rod stuck through his head?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, let me switch back to
or was it like a railroad spike or what was it?
Yeah, it was. I believe it was a railroad spike. Let's see here. Let me switch back to. Oh shit! What the hell? Oh, that's right. Because I was like, "Where's Firefox?" It's still open on this godforsaken. Yeah, here we go. Phineas Gage.
Yeah, this is a person who was stabbed all the way through his head with a railroad spike and survived with...
American railroad construction foreman known for his improbable survival of an accident in which a large iron rod was driven completely through his head, destroying much of his brain's left frontal lobe, and for that injury's reported effects on his personality and behavior over the remaining 12 years of his life, effects sufficiently profound that friends saw him as, quote, no longer Gage, end quote. Long known as the American crowbar case, once termed the case which more than all others is calculated to excite our wonder, impair the value of prognosis, and even subvert our psychological doctrines, end quote. Phineas Gage influenced the 19th century discussion about the mind and brain, particularly debate on cerebral lobotomy's localization, and was perhaps the first case to suggest the brain's role in determining personality, and that changes to specific parts of the brain might induce specific mental changes. Gage is a fixture of the curricula of neurology, psychology, and neuroscience, one of the great medical curiosities of all time, and a living part of the medical folklore. Frequently mentioned in books and scientific papers, he even has a minor place in popular culture. Despite the celebrity, the body of established fact about Gage and what he was like, whether before or after his injury, is small, which has allowed, quote, the fitting of almost any theory desired to the small number of facts we have, end quote. Gage acting as a Rorschach ink blot, in which proponents of various conflicting theories of the brain all saw support for their views. Historically, published accounts of Gage, including scientific ones, have almost always severely exaggerated and distorted his behavioral changes, frequently contradicting the known facts. Oh, well, shit. A report of Gage's physical and mental conditions shortly before his death implies that most serious mental changes were temporary, so that in later life he was far more functional and socially far better adapted than the years immediately following the accident. A social recovery hypothesis suggests that his work as a stagecoach driver in Chile fostered his recovery by providing daily structure that allowed him to regain his lost social and personal skills. Well, shit, never mind. Gonna have to throw that in with oh god, what's the famous case of the person who was murdered in New York and was always like, oh, no one called the police, they all just stayed there, even though they actually did.
Oh yeah. It was supposedly like somebody just got raped right out in public and nobody did anything good, the story goes, but it's just like not true.
Yeah. Well, shit. Well, I'm glad I looked this up and read the Wikipedia page instead of just being like, and the fascinating thing about Phineas Gage is.
Yeah, so even if this story isn't all it's cracked up to be, it's still pointing at something that is true, which is that our brains are susceptible to drastic change due to their physical circumstances. And like, so for example, people that are on drugs, maybe that's just like an easier go-to example is that just being on drugs can drastically influence your personality, your values, your perceptions, just all kinds of things. And I think maybe that's connected to this, because when you challenge people's ability to perceive the world at face value, it's like deeply unsettling, and it's like I get it's kind of a horror thing, right? It's like I get why it would make people feel really uneasy even thinking that kind of thing, and so therefore they might be like more on edge and easier to I don't know.
I think it can also be very frustrating because it's something that doesn't have a clear, actionable information. It's like, oh, sometimes your senses lie to you. It's like, well, I don't have a lot else to go off of, brother. I'm gonna be honest here. Like, most of the time, I'm not gonna have some scientific instrument to like measure this shit. So like, it kind of reminds me of like a common experience I've had with certain friends of mine arguing sort of free will. Is they'll get to this point where they're like, well, what does it matter? And I sort of have to sheepishly say, well, it doesn't. You still have to treat people as moral actors because like all of human relations kind of breaks if you can't treat people as like agents that are like, you know, you have reputations and consequences to their actions. So I think it can be very frustrating to sort of contend with something that's both very uncomfortable, but also it's like there's not much for like an individual person to like do or take into account.
Well, I think there is one thing that people can do about it, but they really don't want to do it, and that's like lower the certainty with which you hold your convictions.
Yeah. That's a big one if we get people on board with that. But
yeah, that's a very uncomfortable ask for people, and that in itself is a thing that people will get really emotional about. Yeah.
And blue. And people debated for weeks on end about whether the dress was really white and gold or really black and blue. The other example I have in mind was more recent, beginning in 2018, was this recording that was going around the internet that to some people sounded like it was saying Yanny, and to other people sounded like it was saying Laurel. And again, people debated for weeks on
that
the
one. I was
internet
able to hear both
what
ways.
the true
basically all those audio ones I can hear in both
that
ways.
recording was.
Have you ever heard of Brainstorm and Green Needle? That's another one.
In that debate,
Oh, no, I haven't heard that one.
Noticed the
Oh, hold on. Okay, hold on. Now we gotta... Hold on. Where is this? What is GB? Great Britain? What the hell?
Yeah, that dress still looks white and gold to me. Just my poor little eyeballs are helpless against it.
Oh, there's a new Guy Ritchie movie with Jake Gyllenhaal? I gotta go see that. YouTube. Okay, here we go. What'd you hear?
It just was unintelligible to me. It just sounds like
hold on,
noise.
let me turn it up.
It said brainstorm or green needle. Okay, I think I heard needle in there.
Uh-oh. The third way.
Oh yeah, green needle. I do hear it.
Okay, well then now think about brainstorm and listen to it again.
I'll try. Oh, actually,
yeah.
Even though that's not the one that I initially heard, like after trying to hear it that way, it actually sounds clearer to me that it is brainstorm rather than green needle.
Yeah, what's so wild too is they're completely different words.
Yeah.
Needle, storm, like yeah, hold on here. Now think green needle again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I can just switch back and forth pretty easily.
Yeah, it's so wild. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. The fact that it just is so clearly either. Yeah, it's something else, man.
Yeah, that's really cool. I gotta show that one to some friends.
It existed, that people became invested in it and even fought angrily about this on the internet for a long period of time. Now, if Socrates'
well, they probably just I bet a lot of the people that were fighting about this stuff just thought they were being gaslit.
Are normative statements about moral, political, and ethical matters that are important to our society and that we care about from a value-based or ethics perspective, then how does he explain these disagreements? How does he explain why the human mind is drawn to fight angrily with another person over something seemingly so trivial? I think I can offer some explanation which maybe can shed some light on disagreement more generally. The way I see it, I think probably what is going on here is that when we encounter a situation where the way we are perceiving the world in a very simple, straight, and straightforward way, right? Just the color we are seeing a dress to be, what we are hearing a recording to say. When those very simple things are not seen or heard the same way by other people, I think it can cause us to lose confidence in our ability to discover truths about the world. It can cause us to lose confidence in our senses. And our senses just are the way we get information about the world and make decisions. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be, right? It's on the one hand, it's uncomfortable enough if you gather all this information about the physical world, and then you have a hard time sort of making sense of it or interpreting it. But it's an even more difficult place to be if you start questioning, well, maybe the sense data I'm getting from the world isn't even accurate. If all these other people think that the dress is blue and black and I'm seeing it as white and gold, then maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And when you start to lose
There's something
confidence
fundamentally
in
wrong
your
with
ability
them.
to have a grasp on the truth, it can be very easy to sort of lash out. It can be very easy to want to defend the way you see the world as sort of a last grasp at trying to retain one's
Yeah, I
sanity.
think it's a combination of this plus thinking that
And
other
I
people are
think something
gaslighting
like
you when they
that is
tell
going
you.
on.
Mhm.
Whether the matter is trivial or whether it concerns a matter of public concern like abortion or the death penalty or climate change, human beings do have a very difficult time at tolerating disagreement. We have a very difficult time with the idea that other people see the world differently than we do. And I think also to a large extent, this can explain why so many disagreements are not just cordial, but often devolve into violent and heated rhetoric and often devolve into angry conflict.
I think was that the end of the video?
No,
Oh
last
no, okay.
section.
But can we pause here for a second? I want to add that also, like the very first thing that you said right at the beginning, I think was also hinting at a big reason for this, which the way you put it was we're evolved lizards, but the way I'm going to put it is tribalism, right? It's like just that humans have a tendency to form groups and think like this is my group and they're always right, and the other there are other groups that are always bad and always wrong. And I think that feeds in a lot into why people are willing to fight even about trivial things.
Yep. There's a huge incentive to fight already, so it's almost like looking for an excuse.
Yeah.
So, to some extent, I think Socrates has overstated his case. It is not only the case that we fight about normative statements. In fact, it might be a curse of the human situation that we can fight over almost anything. At the same time, Socrates has made a real insight. There is a difference of degree here. We might fight over what color the dress truly is, but the sort of anger and vehemence of that fight doesn't really compare to, for instance, the fight about the ethics of abortion or the ethics of the death penalty or who we should vote for in the upcoming election. Those sorts of fights not only have a real much higher degree of anger, but can in fact break out into actual real world violence. And so I think it's worth to conclude this video to think about why that is and
You
perhaps
just wait
what
until
can
the
be
dress
done
wars.
to prevent that to some
Yeah.
extent. So let's think about this point more closely.
Socrates could not have predicted
Why
Twitter.
do we fight with so much more anger and sometimes, unfortunately, even violence about matters pertaining to morality? Well, I think to start off, we can notice that ethics and morals has to do with our values. It has to do with what we think is important. It has to do with how we think it is appropriate to live our lives. And when we're talking about our values, we're also talking about our character, right? If you were to ask someone, how do you identify, like, what is your self-conception? Right, a part of that would be maybe where you came from or your name, right, and various other characteristics about yourself. But probably a part of it would be also what you value, your beliefs about various moral matters. Some of those might just be sort of more mundane things about I think it's important to be honest and have integrity, but they also might be beliefs about more controversial matters as For instance, the examples I've discussed in this video. So, our values are things that shape our character, and our character is integral to how we conceive of who we are as persons. And what this means is that when you take a position on a controversial moral issue, whether it be abortion or the death penalty, who to vote for, the ethics of lying, or anything else that falls within that realm, you're often seen as making a statement about yourself and who you are. And of course, there's nothing we want to protect more than ourselves and have a sort of sense of self preservation. So when we encounter someone who thinks differently than we do on a controversial moral issue, we might interpret that not just as them making a claim about the world, as with a factual statement, but making a claim about our character. If this person disagrees with our view on some important moral or political issue, then we might think that they are saying there's something deficient about us because there's something deficient about our values. And I think to a large extent, this can explain why people fight so hard and so angrily and even violently to protect what they see as a certain ideology or to protect their moral or political or religious beliefs. So, what does this show us? Well, I think to the extent that that sort of situation is undesirable, then one thing we should try to do is separate ourselves to some degree from our moral, ethical, and political beliefs. When we encounter someone who believes something differently than we do on those questions, we shouldn't necessarily take it as a personal attack because we shouldn't wrap our entire identity up in our answers to those questions. In fact, ideally, we would be in a situation where we would be willing to
Can we
change our
pause?
mind if someone else.
Is it possible, do you think, for us to not wrap up our identity in the answers to those questions? I'm not sure this is actually actionable.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't know, like, if humans are going to be able to, like, compartmentalize their mind to this degree, or almost any degree. It's kind of like, I think one of the many, many arguments, wars on the Destiny subreddit about Nick Fuentes was sort of this question of would Nick Fuentes' friendly stream appearances appear on stream? And the people, or would Nick Fuentes' appearances on stream create more fondness or normalization effect in Destiny's community? And I remember there was this one really good comment that was responding to people who said, no, it won't. The people who said, no, it won't would say something like, oh, you guys, I can't, I'm going to wake up tomorrow after one Nick Fuentes stream and everyone's going to be a Nazi, which I don't really think is the case. And there's one good comment, which was something to the effect of, no matter what you guys think, you aren't robots. And if you have friendly interactions with a person, you're going to soften your opinion on that person, bottom line, for better or for worse, whether that's right or wrong. There's no getting around that. And I think it's sort of unavoidable. It kind of reminds me actually of something I've been thinking about recently, which is I've started to wonder if certain kinds of media depictions are responsible to ever be done. Specifically,
Did you say media depictions? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The specific example I've been thinking about, just a thought experiment, are anti-heroes. I don't know how many times there's a show about an anti-hero where the show is intended to criticize them, to be like, wow, they're a bad person, and instead they end up getting worshipped. I mean, I feel like there's a billion examples, like Walter White, like Rick from Rick and Morty, stuff like this. And man, I just kind of wonder, or Jax from Sons of Anarchy,
Because they make antisocial behavior look cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of wonder if it's ever possible to do that in a way where no matter what you do, there's always going to be a significant chunk of people that look at that and be like, that's awesome. I want to do that. And if that's the case, I wonder how responsible it is to do it. I mean, ultimately, it's like a moot point because like you'll never get rid of this kind of media depiction, right? I mean, like it'll never go away. So it's ultimately just a thought experiment. But I kind of do wonder if it would be the case that like the most moral action would be like, yeah, we're just not doing any anti-hero medias anymore. Like we'll just do everything's going to be like the Lord of the Rings from now on.
That anti-hero thing I think is a really interesting point because it's like it's easy to imagine it's like that it's glorifying a certain type of behavior that we really don't want to glorify and then I'm just trying to think like do people in real life think of themselves as anti-heroes because of those depictions and then behave accordingly? And it seems like that must be true, but like,
oh yes, 100%. I've met some of these people that take themselves way too seriously and think they're like in like some TV show where they're like, yeah, don't mess with me, you know, don't mess with my bad side, stuff like this. Or I mean, there's a whole genre of like ironic posting of what was originally unironic postings, like I can be your angel or your devil, like don't mess with me or I'll unleash the demon inside, like I've got a dark side, dude, stuff like this.
I mean, to me, this seems like the behavior of a 14-year-old kid, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would have. I wish it was contained to 14-year-olds, but I mean, like sometimes, like the like I think a great example would be like the Punisher. That's a character that like lots of adults even are like, oh yeah, dude, like Frank Castle, you know, he like blew the knees off of that like criminal, you know, he I'm not saying it's right, but it's just, or you know, and there's all sorts of this stuff that like is dotted throughout our culture to varying degrees of like vigilantism or doing just really morally important stuff, but it's to like a bad person, so it's okay to like not even just agree with it or tolerate it, but sometimes like fetishize it. And with so many of these shows, I think it really seals the deal where these shows are explicitly created with the intent not to do that. This is the responsible version of an anti-hero, you know, something like Breaking Bad, where it's explicitly at the very end, Walter White's like, I did it because I liked it. It wasn't for my family. I was good at it. I wanted to feel powerful. And there's still a legion of people that are like, yeah, Heisenberg's the man. Oh, it's so awesome. Yeah, fuck Skylar White. Yeah, fuck her. Goddamn. And man, I just really wonder if humans are mature enough to engage with that kind of thing. It almost reminds me of like Destiny's take on private jokes. It's like I almost wonder. It's like, you know what? If you're gonna do that kind of storytelling, it can only be to like your friends. It won't be like in a D&D campaign or a story you only publish to your friends, because when you put it out to the public, people are gonna take it the wrong way. Same way if you do like a joke that has like racist elements, right? Even like the classic example is the Dave Chappelle show, where Dave Chappelle's jokes are clearly not meant to be like, yeah, black people are bad, but that is absolutely how they get taken by certain crowds. I mean, I think my first introduction to the Chappelle show was on poll on 4chan or 8chan, where like some dude was posting them and like, yeah, dude, even Dave Chappelle recognizes that black people are stupid, or something like this. And I just wonder if sort of that same degree, I wonder if there's ever a world where you can put out these kinds of stories and not have a significant portion of the people who watch it come away with really bad like understandings of what the lesson of the media is.
Yeah, where there's like an intended irony to the presentation, but people just kind of either gloss over the irony or don't notice it at all, and instead just take the thing at face value, and it ends up being, you know, I mean, yeah. That's kind of the problem with irony, isn't it? Is that things are the opposite of what they appear at face value, yeah. And there's a risk.
Or a Peaky Blinders, Thomas Shelby, another classic example where, I mean, there's a million, especially as a young guy, unironic like Sigma grind set, up your grind set videos of Thomas Shelby like walking into a store with a bomb and being like, do what I say or I'll blow you up and kill you. And it's like playing some music where it's like, yeah, that's so badass. Actually, hold on, yeah, let me just look up. Hold on.
This seems really like closely connected to the whole concept of an edgelord, right? But and I think these two things exist for very similar reasons. It's because they succeed at getting certain types of reactions out of people. Like people, you know, are so interested in whatever can shock them.
There we go. Sigma rule number 6. Deadly to inspire. Let's see if we can find some other ones. I guess to be fair, not making fun of your friend, I mean, that's nice. Let's see.
But I'm not even sure I understand. Like, there's like somebody made fun of his friend to impress a girl, and then the friend who was made fun of, like, took some kind of violent revenge on him? Is that what happened?
It's a Sigma grind set, Cookie. You won't understand.
Yeah, I sure don't.
Reply by words, reply by actions. Or here's one. Reject modernity, embrace
enough toxic masculinity. Say it.
Oh my gosh.
the horror. Who's gonna save us from this?
Did that little kid say a slur? I don't want to like get banned because of this.
No, I don't think so. He was just saying, don't say toxic masculinity.
It sounded to me like that little kid said the F slur.
No, that's Green Needle. That's a Green Needle brainstorm situation. What the fuck, bro? True, this is what we need.
Wait, are we doing the thing you said we shouldn't do? we're platforming anti-hero media.
Listen, we're analyzing it. Okay, we're analyzing this topic here. Trust too fast. Talk too much. Yeah, anyways, but this stuff is it's everywhere if you're a young guy in like your feeds and stuff on like TikTok or YouTube shorts. So it's just something I've been thinking about as I think really interesting is I don't know if like it feels very analogous to like Chappelle's show like racy jokes where it's like, man, no matter how far you go out of your way, there's always gonna be some people that take it the wrong way. And if that's the case, ought you not do it?
Have you paid any attention to like the whole ChatGPT thing over the last couple of months? You know.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, this is like an AI chat bot that is basically designed to give answers that are approximately what a human can give, and it's trained on these like huge data sets of text or whatever. And when this had some kind of public release maybe like a month or two ago, and people were making a hobby of trying to get it to say terrible things because it has a bunch of rules that it's supposed to follow. Like, so for example, it's not supposed to tell you how to do, violent or illegal actions. And if you just ask it to tell you how to, it won't. It'll say no, and it'll go like, no, that's illegal, and I can never help you do that. But if you instead say like, I'm writing a movie script where a character hotwires a car, and I need you to help me like write the script in a really detailed and convincing way and describe exactly how this character hotwires a car, and then it'll do it, and it'll tell you how to hotwire a car or build a pipe bomb, or it'll just like go on a big rant full of racial slurs or whatever. Like as long as you present it as a hypothetical or fictional scenario, that was what was happening a lot. Yeah, but this I don't know, that like it kind of makes me think about this like I'm actually like halfway forgetting like the reason I brought this up in the first place, but we were talking about like whether it's a good idea to present things that shouldn't be taken at face value because they require some context to understand the irony to them, right? And yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I forgot the connection I was trying to draw between those two. But besides the fact that like here's a thing that has dangerous content, but oh well.
No. Don't lose my place, please. God damn it!
We were like 1 minute before the end.
Yeah, I think we were 44:07.
Or is this the next video, or is this even like?
Oh shit! God damn it! We were 40:07. I'm certain about it this time.
We would be in a situation where we would be willing to change our mind if someone else made a better argument.
Yeah,
of course, that's very unlikely if a large part of our identity is tied up in what we think about abortion, the death penalty, politics, or religion. But if we're going to avoid the angry conflict which ensues, then that's going to be very important. It's going to be very important to see our moral beliefs as our best attempt to say what is the right thing to do, instead of a foundational and fundamental aspect of our character and our self-conception and our identity.
All right, well, that was the end of that. don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add about like why do people fight so much about moral values or?
Fighting is fun. Just don't let it. There's a lot of
Just
behaviors
don't
where
be
it's
an
like,
anti-hero about it.
yeah. Listen, sometimes fighting is fun. Taking out your aggression is fun, but you need to do it in a way that's responsible. I think, like a lot of things, it's okay to engage in some, risque behavior as long as you have a good comprehension of why it's risque and how to do it responsibly. So if you want to go all out with your friends and argue, by all means do it, but make sure you don't, accidentally build resentment and destroy your friendship, because that's bad.
Yeah, for sure. I don't actually have anything else I want to add to that. I think that's a good way to wrap it up. Do you want to shout yourself out or anything before we're done?
Yep, twitch.tv/Flowtrace, twitter.com/Flowtrace, and I'm here most Wednesdays.
Okay, and I'm going to send you guys over to Black Yamato. He's our friend, and he's a good guy, and he's playing Fire Emblem today. So see you all next week.
See ya.